Good morning, everybody. You are currently listening to a Tall Girls podcast hosted by a tall girl named India. I hope everyone who is tuning in today is doing super fantastic. We have a very, very special guest with us here today. Funny thing about it is that it's not the usual guest that I would have on here. Usually I interview other tall women or women who own tall brands, but we have somebody fits a different category. Hi, David. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me here today, Indy. I am superhuman and getting younger by the day. Thanks for asking.
I absolutely love that response. Can you please just introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Well, Dr. David Lipman, I'm a chiropractic physician here in Boca Raton, Florida. And my sort of life's journey and journey for my professional life too is all about how do we optimize our body's function in terms of healing and being healthy and staying healthy and actually not succumbing to the aging process, but actually why can't we get stronger as we get older? Why can't we improve all of our physical attributes with some investment instead of just saying, well, after 40, it's all downhill. So that's what my personal life and my professional life's dedicated to. And obviously, there's many layers to that.
Thank you for that introduction. And I think that a major, major topic, especially because, you're very knowledgeable about health and wellness, and a major topic of discussion when it comes to the tall community is relating to posture. We struggle with posture in our day-to-day lives, not even necessarily just, working or sitting at a laptop or anything, but even just doing day-to-day activities like cleaning, washing dishes. I literally spoke about that on my stories yesterday, or even sleeping. And, I wanted to ask you, can you talk a little bit about posture and the importance of it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something I really get to talk about every day with all my patients, regardless, the height. Posture, we always think of it of, this like aesthetic kind of standing up straight kind of thing. But posture is really so much more than that. It's much more of a fluid and dynamic thing in terms of how our bodies are bearing weight and how we're moving. And when we say perfect posture, what we're really talking about is how our musculoskeletal system, which is what we're looking at as posture, affects our organ systems and our circulatory systems and our digestive systems. That's where posture goes beyond just the sort of aesthetics. And granted, having back pain because of, let's say, quote unquote, poor posture is a condition. And the importance I think I want the audience and everybody that comes into my office to understand is that posture is much more of a function of having your musculoskeletal system be optimized so your weight bearing and your movement is also optimizing all those other processes I mentioned within the body itself. So I want people to expand their thought on posture and not just how good you look standing up straight.
Yeah, that sounds really awesome. And you did say that you speak about posture a lot with your patients. What are the most common reasons that you've seen as to why people have quote unquote poor posture?
So another great question. I find that what we do in our daily lives tend to mold us, mold our posture. As an example, now more than ever, a lot of people sit for work. When I was a kid, there were no computers, and most people that worked, it was some kind of manual labor, or if they were more of an executive, they would have a desk, but they weren't sitting typing at a computer per se. And so the tasks of a daily life, in various scenarios is what is going to mold somebody. Here's another kind of example. A lot of people last, bit of the day, they might sit on a couch and watch television for an hour or two. How you sit in that couch, and if you always tend to sit in that same place on the couch, is going to tend to start to shift your musculoskeletal weight bearing. So then when you are walking and you are standing, that shift has already kind of become the new, dysfunctional imbalance, I'll call it, which is going to affect posture. So what I try to get people to start thinking about that come in here, because many people access me because of pain, and I want them to take a look at what's happening every day. What are your stressors that are molding you? And if so, once you identify them, how can you mitigate some of that where it's possible? As an example, can you get a stand-up desk where you can either have the option of standing and sitting? And also, can you be dedicated to unwind the dysfunctional tension that builds up from a daily activity of sitting at a computer, and be willing to do that so that doesn't get ahead of you, to restore posture through proper exercise, mobility, functional kind of training, so that that's not going to have a negative impact on you as maybe it has been up to this point.
I like how you spoke about even something as simple as when you're sitting and watching television can ultimately affect how we stand, how we sit, how our posture just in general. And, I think it's really important to also be, because of that, I think it's also very important to be aware of the consequences of, what you're doing on the day to day. Like what types of bodily issues, what types of problems, I guess, physical problems can that lead to if you're sitting or standing incorrectly?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to take it back to how our bodies are such an incredible interactive system. Every system affects every system. So again, our musculoskeletal system affects our circulatory system, our nervous system, our digestive system. And when you think it in those terms, in order for all the systems to be optimized, you have to start with what is going to be the effect of having a negative posture, let's say, on all these other systems. And understanding that really has to be something that you would dedicate yourself and invest in yourself and do things proactively to make sure you minimize those negative potential effects. So again, looking at your daily habits and activity is very important to see, again, how can you minimize things that'll distort posture. And the drop down effect is, maybe for a woman, maybe her menstrual cycles are going to start to be much more uncomfortable, as an example, because of,
Wow.
yeah, absolutely. Because, congestion at the musculoskeletal level will interrupt flow, will cause more pressure. And when things aren't flowing properly, that means we're not removing waste products as much as we should. So things can build up, inflammation builds up. And there's a lot of cause of inflammation, of course. But when you look at how poor posture, negative posture starts to affect all those systems. Things like a regular thing like a menstrual cycle can absolutely be affected. And I've had so many women patients over the years, starting from when I started out in the 1980s, that might have come to me for low back pain and then continued to do the chiropractic, do some of the exercises I've prescribed to restore them and maximize their posture. And again, posture not just from the static, but from the fluid and the dynamic aspect. And say, I don't know if this is related, but I used to get really bad period cramps, and I don't get that anymore. Is that a coincidence? I said, no, it's not a coincidence. Or I used to have really bad digestive issues, and now I'm not having that. Even to the extreme where men and women have had just extreme pain, even after eating a meal. And they'll go to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh, you have a hiatal hernia, or you have reflux," and they'll try to put them on some drugs. When all that's really happening is those internal muscles, paraspinal muscles, pelvic muscles, are so tight because the skeletal system is just not optimally supporting that person and moving. So those congestions can really have a big impact on all of those internal systems. So I think if I wanted one message to get across to people, is to understand that posture is not just about, having rounded shoulders and, looking poorly when you're standing up straight. It's so much more impactful than that.
That is absolutely fascinating and probably a little bit scary, not gonna lie. And I'm pretty sure that none of us wants that to happen to us, especially tall people, because we're more likely to have sit incorrectly, stand incorrectly, even sleep incorrectly. So I was wondering if you could just share some daily lifestyle habits that, I mean, yes, us tall people, but honestly, everyone can adopt to improve and maintain better posture.
Absolutely. So I have one of my two daughters. I have four children. But my younger daughter, she's just shy of 6 feet tall. So from the time she was in kindergarten, she was a head taller than all the kids, and so she had to go through a lot of things because of height. More so as she got probably into her teenage years, because she was, always a head taller than everybody else. And, as you probably know, and your audience probably knows, there's a tendency for tall people, men and women, of course, to, slouch their shoulders and kind of lean down, because most of the people they're communicating with are, way down there. So
Yeah.
when I started to see that in my daughter, I said, you know something, honey? I said, let them strain their necks looking up to you, because you don't need to feel, first of all, uncomfortable about being tall. The second thing is that it's going to start to bother you, and it's going to cause problems down the road. Maybe not when you're 15, 16, but by the time you're in your 30s and 40s, those habits and that normal posture of yours, which really isn't, is going to cause an increase in wear and tear on your system. So I was able to encourage her to, forget the social part of it. Let people look up to her, don't accommodate that just because, you're tall. They can meet you. You stay up tall, because it's going to be much more important to your later health and current health too, to do that. So think of that mindset, but also the kinds of exercises that need to be done to maintain mobility and strengthen the proper balance. Let me give you another example. In recent years, people understand the need for a strong quote unquote core. So the statement is true. However, it makes it sound like that it's only one section that has to be strong. It's one of many sections that have to be interactive together and solid and functional together for the whole structure to work. So it's not just about getting stronger abs or stronger lower back muscles. It's how the whole system interacts, and understanding, as an example, that your lower back muscles and your glutes need to be stronger than the abdominal muscles in the front for that proper angle of skeletal correctness from a postural standpoint. A lot of people are going to work a lot of their abs, but they don't address the lower back muscles, as well. Or because of sitting, the hip flexors, the psoas muscles, which are deep in the pelvis in the front, they actually attach the spine to the hip. So when they're tight and they're not moving properly, it puts a lot of stress on the spine, and it gets the hamstrings to try to compensate, because the gluteal muscles are not going to fire properly. And not to go too much down the rabbit hole, but these are very specific mechanisms in the body. And so to have proper posture, those mechanisms have to be, in fact, working. So your hip flexor muscles, even if you're sitting all day, you have to stretch those so that you don't fall into that compensatory dysfunctional support by the body. You want to always get the body to be supporting itself through proper balance, left and right, front to back, and mobility, because the old adage is, if you don't use it, you will lose it. And it doesn't have to be that way. Again, tall people, some of the things that I noticed too, for my daughter, like you had mentioned earlier, most homes that are built for us, they're with an average person's height, in mind. And so doing the dishes is much more of a challenge for somebody that's, 6 feet or 6 feet 2 or 6 feet 3 versus someone that's 5'6" or 5'4". And so, it's difficult how the world around somebody that's on that other side of the spectrum has to interact with something that's not ergonomically, set for them. But it just probably puts the onus on people that have more height to be more aware of how can they modify themselves in a world that isn't really constructed as well for them, because it's for the average person. And it all comes down to trying to make your body as resilient and strong as possible through exercise, so that the daily things that might normally have a negative effect on you won't affect you as negatively, because you have a mechanism to change that, to keep getting more resilient, so that daily life doesn't, beat you down to where you're uncomfortable and you're in pain all the time, because, that's likely going to happen if you don't take those proactive measures.
Yeah, these are all very good points. And that also kind of brings up something else, where you were talking about many people believe that strengthening the core can, improve your posture and stuff. And this is something that it kind of like brings the idea of like social media, especially TikTok, where they try to promote like this certain ideas to help a specific problem, and that some of these posts or these videos that are out there that's like giving information relating to this, it's not really taking the whole body into consideration because you are also talking about the lower back and the glutes and the hamstrings and all that stuff. So I think it's definitely important to be hearing this from a professional and not just, social media and TikTok. And you were also speaking about like doing exercises to strengthen your body and stretching, such as like your hip flexors. What are a few basic like stretches and exercises that you would recommend for tall people and all people to help alleviate, that strain?
So one of the best ways to get and keep the hip flexors loose are lunge type stretches. So if you were to, let's say, set up in a position where you were about to like do a push up, with your toe on your toes, not on your knees. So your body's extended, your hands are on the ground, and then you would simply bring one foot forward and put it right outside your hand. So your one leg is back straight, but the other one is coming forward. And when you lean into that, your hip flexors, again, they're on the front of your spine through your pelvis to your hip. So that's going to stretch them. And then you could even augment that by on the same side your leg is forward, reaching for the sky with a rotation too, because rotation is something that a lot of people don't do enough, and it's a movement that if you don't do a lot, but then some task in everyday life, you go bend over and twist a little, pick something else. All of a sudden, you try to stand up and you can't because the mechanics have not been, worked on there. And so with that tension and lack of that rotational mobility, a lot of people get hurt that way, just bending over to put on a sock. I can't tell you how many people in the last almost 40 years I've been doing this told me that they went to put their sock on and they went to stand up and they couldn't. They got locked in this position. So it's
Oh
important to
my.
keep that, yeah, that mobility from a rotational and a lateral movement, side to side, because most of us are moving kind of front to back. Most of our tasks, driving, sitting, it's all front to back stuff. There's not enough rotation and lateral movements. So exercises that help that from both a stretching and a strengthening standpoint are important. But the lunge stretch is a really good one for the hip flexors. Now, there's another thing that I recommend people do that really have some deep tension in there. If you get a ball like the size of a baseball, little smaller than a softball, and you kind of lay on top of it and you lay it right across the one side of your spine in your pelvic area. So you're on the ground on your forearms. That ball is in there when you try to relax your body weight. So you relax your abdominal wall. So that ball goes really deep into the front of your pelvis. And then you simply roll your body over that ball like foam rolling, but now you're using a ball that's actually getting deep, deep, deep into that hip flexor and doing like a foam rolling thing, but it's actually getting in deep where you normally couldn't get to something like that. Doing that on both sides is a really great way to self-release that muscle. And the ball makes it a lot smoother because it's going to kind of roll it almost like a massage. And there's actually balls out there that vibrate that you can do that same thing with, which facilitates it a little bit more. So loosening up the hip flexors and then doing like glute bridges, single leg and double leg, to really make sure you're firing your glutes, because if your glutes aren't firing because your psoas is too tight, your hamstrings are going to start tightening up and working to do what the glutes should be doing, but they're not. And then the low back muscles tighten up on top of it. So again, these are small little things you could do at home. You don't have to join the gym to do it. Not that I'm not discouraging anyone from going to the gym, of course, but
Yeah.
these are things that on a regular basis, especially if you're sitting so much of the day, to really keep those areas mobile, strong and resilient the way they should be.
I also kind of want to ask a question too before we get to the last one, because you
Mm-hmm.
brought up the point of going to the gym. Do
Yeah.
you think that, like, I don't want to say extreme workouts, but I would probably say weightlifting because there's there's weightlifting and then there's like extreme weightlifting. Like people add plates and plates and plates onto stuff, especially these like gym TikTokers. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie, when I see some of those videos, I get a little scared. I just wanted to ask, like, do you think that um weightlifting, especially like very heavy weights that can have like a significant impact on your musculoskeletal system?
Yeah. So unfortunately, when I was younger, especially when I would go to the gym, because I've been working out since I'm 10 years old. I actually didn't start going to the gym until I was about 19. I did all calisthenics, push-ups, pull-ups. dips, things that were just body weight exercises. And it really helped probably stave off a lot of the wear and tear I probably would have had if I started lifting weights that young.
Yeah.
However, by the time I was 19 and I started doing the gym thing, many times throughout my, 20s and even my 30s, I would have different guys depending on where I lived that I would work out with. And, when you a bunch of young guys together, you get the egos involved, trying to outdo each other. I definitely lifted a lot more heavier weight than I should have been. Now, I lifted it because I could, but not because I should. And the reason I say that is because now in my 60s, the amount of wear and tear and arthritis and spinal stenosis and issues with my shoulders and my hips that I have would have been so much less had I not gone that way in that route. Now, for the last probably 10, 15 years, I've been more focused on what I call functional training. Functional training is how you can stay strong and resilient to your daily tasks. So, even if you're, let's say, a young mom, all of a sudden you have a 10, 15, 20, 25 pound child and, into 2 years old that you're carrying around. So, I think your functional training needs to be able to be stronger in the gym with exercise than what that child carrying them around for the first 2 3 years of their life is going to be, because that's going to impact you. So it's not about lifting the heavy weights. It's about trying to do the things that are going to keep your body resilient to whatever it has to be doing every day. I think that's really the way people should train. It's not taught that way in the gyms typically, but if you really want exercise to be something you can do for your whole life and continue to do it and make your daily activities much easier for you, then you have to get stronger in the gym at those tasks and those types of movements. So whatever happens in everyday life is not going to have such a negative impact on you. That's what I think about that.
Yeah, I think that's honestly really good advice, not necessarily, going to the gym to get bigger or look bigger, but more so that you're able to complete the tasks that you have to do. So I think that that is really awesome. And, that does bring us to our last question. If there's any piece of advice, like what is one piece of advice that you would like to give to the tall people who are listening right now, who are struggling with physical pains because of their posture or their height?
Yes, it's going to be somewhat difficult to be able to make one statement. If I had to encompass all I would say in one statement, I would say is, if you don't understand it yourself, find somebody nearby that really specializes in functional training and somebody that could understand your particular physical structure and how that needs to be re-engineered through exercise to a much more, I'll say, posturally perfect. But when I'm talking about posturally perfect, in terms about the balance of how you're bearing weight and how all of you is moving, all of you, not just how you're looking standing up straight, because that type of training is going to be the thing that's going to keep you as you continue to grow or get older, to be able to have a method, a task, something that you can invest in every day that's going to, again, minimize the chance that you're going to have any kind of pain syndrome. And, for me, pain is not a lifestyle, but it also is up to us, the individual, I say to my patients, look, what you do every day in that body that you're walking around in is going to have way more of an impact than anything I could do as a chiropractor or if I'm a trainer. But we all need to become our own self-care experts of what are my personal needs and how do I, get my life where those things are being addressed. For me, I'm exercising, first thing in the morning. I do superhuman protocol at 4 a.m. and then 5 a.m. I do it at the gym. But again, everything is geared toward keeping my body healthy, strong, and resilient and continually moving in that direction. And so I would say find somebody nearby, or you could look on YouTube about functional training. There might even be some specialties that have the things that could be appropriate for somebody that's a little bit taller, but you have to be dedicated. You have to be the one to initiate it. It's got to come from within, and you just have to be dedicated and say, okay, this is part of my life. I'm never taking it out.
That was really great. And honestly, I wish that we could end on that note because that was such a good, like, concluding point. But I also kind of want to just really quickly, because this whole episode, this whole time, we've been doing like perfect posture in air quotes, good posture in air quotes. And it's important to like discuss the fact that there is no one set particular type of posture that's perfect. So I just wanted to know if you can give like a little bit of your 2 cents on, the whole perfect posture and good posture terminology.
So, I mean, one of the things that you can look at from a static standpoint, again, I said posture is dynamic, but in a single moment when somebody's standing, the posture that somebody should have is if you're looking at them from the side and you drew a straight vertical line straight down through their side, that line should go through their ear, their shoulder, their hip, their knee, and their ankle. And if in fact there's deviation from that, you can use that as a mechanism to start to see, okay, my head's coming too far forward from that. That line's not going through my ear properly. So what do? I would have you lay face down on your bed and just let your head lay over the edge of your bed and just drop your head straight to the floor and then raise it up towards the ceiling. That will start to increase the strength of those neck muscles on the back that are responsible for holding your head up straight. And again, with texting and everything else that we're doing with our devices, that posture going with that head forward is being reinforced constantly. So those muscles forward are getting tightened up. So you need to reinforce the ones that pull you in the other direction. Again, just using the weight of your head as resistance. When it comes to your shoulders, if that line's not going through your shoulders properly and your head and your neck are not, your head, neck, and shoulders aren't lining up, doing things that retract your shoulders with resistance. In other words, pulling back your shoulder blades back and towards the spine together, and also getting them from top to bottom. One of the exercises most people know what a lat pull down is. There's a bar that you pull down and you bring it like this. I tell people do it one at a time, because if you bring one side down at a time, you have much more range of motion and you can get much more of a complete contraction. So it's not just about having your shoulders back, but they also have to be back and down. So that mechanism of strength is going to keep those shoulders from being rounded forward. So it's shoulder blades back and down. So that's a great way to do it, but I definitely suggest doing it with single arms because you get much more range of motion and better, deeper contractions to really get that muscle strong. When it comes to the lower back and the torso area, doing things that combine the movement of the spine and the pelvis using the lower back and the glute muscles. There's something called a reverse hyperextension where you're going to be laying over, let's say, a stability ball on a bench. So you're kind of holding the bench, your body, your torso is laying on there, and behind you, you're bringing your legs up straight, contracting at your lower back and your glutes to bring those legs up. That's really going to have you get those muscles strong that are going to have you standing up straighter. And again, it's not from the static standpoint, it's more from that fluid and dynamic standpoint, so that all those joints and the way they're holding the weight is going to be well balanced instead of certain areas getting more of your weight bearing because of, again, poor posture. So those are some of the things that you can do, but using that plumb line, that vertical, if you can get someone to take a picture and you draw a straight line, you could start to analyze, okay, this is where I'm off. What do I have to do to get that line to be straight? Even just leaning against the back of the wall, put your head all the way back against the wall, get your shoulders back, get your glutes back, and get your heels back. If you can't do that as a practice to just try to realign your body by getting your muscles to respond to straightening it out. But I mean, that's the best I can really do to give somebody some guidance on how they might be able to sort of do that at home.
That was really awesome. This was a very informative episode. Like, I think this is probably the most I've ever learned relating to, like, how they have health classes in like college and
Sure,
high
sure.
school. I'm pretty sure I learned way more than I ever did in those classes in these past few minutes. So,
Well, just so you know, I just made up everything I just told you.
please, 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 David, where can we find you on the internet? Please let us know.
Yeah, so physicalevidence.com is physicalevidencechiropractic.com is the website. We have a little button where you could ask Dr. Dave something and people can put their information in with questions. And I will definitely get back. And I've gotten better at like sort of doing something remotely where I can give good insight to somebody, because especially with things like Zoom, I can actually take a look at posture. I can analyze motion of how somebody might be doing, like, say, a squat or things like that. And I can give them a foundation of things to start with. There's some really great exercise bands on Amazon that you can get for the house and do so much with. Again, if you don't have the time or inclination to go to the gym, you can, for 25 bucks, I think, on Amazon, there's something. So I recommend that to a lot of people, certainly my patients here, but I've done that with people remotely too. So physicalevidencechiropractic.com. On Instagram, we're Boca Raton Chiropractor, and you can DM us there too, and we'll always respond and try our best to see if we can help you sort through some of the things that you want to take control of, but not sure really where to start.
Awesome. And those are going to be linked below. So it's super easy for everyone. They could just check it out in the description. And I'm going to take the time to plug myself at It's All Girls Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. And, hit me up, hit David up. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Did you find it informative? Were there good tips? Is there anything else that you would want to know? Like, feel free to let us know. We're all about the engagement, of course. And thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much again, Dr. David, for joining me today. I really do appreciate all of the information that you gave us.
It's my pleasure. I love to share what I can, and with a medium like this, I can reach more people than normally would be walking into my office. So thanks for having me here, and having some of the reach that you have that hopefully will bring value to people.
Of course. And until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Good night and goodbye.